Hello, everyone. Welcome back to UK Edu Stories with myself, Bookie Youssef, and my co-host, Mark Anderson. This week, we're going to be looking at how to do online learning brilliantly, ! And I'm really excited to invite our two guests this evening with us, who will be sharing their insights, tips, and things to avoid. But before we introduce our guests, please make sure that you are subscribed to our channel and that you hit the notification bell as well, so that every time we appear each week at this time on a Thursday, you will be able to join in straight away with our shows. So Mark, how has your week been?
Yeah, really, really good. Thank you, Bookie. Busy. Really pleased to have launched version 3 of the Digital Strategy Guide, which has been getting some lovely comments and things. Been doing some work with a few schools. This afternoon I was working with a primary school in Peterborough, for example. So yeah, usual suspects really. And it's interesting you're talking about sort of, making sure you hit the subscribe button. What I love is when people watch us on a big TV. There's nothing like it's a bit scary, but some of the photos that we get of people watching the live show actually on their television, on a 60-inch television, makes me feel like I should be actually doing this rather than sitting so close.
I know.
Very close to the camera. But please do subscribe, and we share lots of great content, and there's so many professional learning opportunities to jump in on. And sort of learn about and find out about through the show. So please do hit that subscribe button. Please do make sure you say hello in the live chat as well. And on the topic this evening, if you do have any questions for our guests or for myself and Bookie, then please do feel free to pop those into the chat, whether you're watching on YouTube or via Periscope. And we'll be happy to take those to our guests here this evening. But Bookie, asking you the same question, how's your week been?
Oh, it's been interesting. Good week. I got involved. You know me, Mark, and anything to do with EdTech, I'm like, signed up for it. Very excited. So Monday, I took part in an online event, actually the first of 4 days at the Sec Ed online conference. And my session was about leadership lessons, EdTech leadership lessons, and some of the reflections, and sharing some of the great tools that are out there that will help us plan, even though we're not quite sure about what's actually happening, but can actually help us take our remote learning forward. I did a shout out to yourself and Al, so the strategies you actually shared, and also some questions to ask regarding procurement and making sure that the EdTech that we use is fit for purpose. So that's Monday, and tomorrow I'm taking part in another event. It's a free webinar called What Do Educators Want and Need from Education Technologies? And I'll share the link. So even though it takes place at 11 o'clock, and normally that's when staff, teachers are in school, I work freelance, so I'm not at school tomorrow, but I'll share the link with everyone. So what I'd say is, even if you're teaching, sign up, register, so that you can actually watch the replay when it actually is shared later on.
Sounds like a plan. It's always a good thing to do as well. That's one of the reasons why I love the show that we do as well. When I first started doing the work on UK Edu Stories, it was just on Periscope, but the platform of YouTube is such a great place to sort of leave that legacy of previous shows, so people can watch back. People can't always actually make it live, and finding things on a Twitter timeline is really difficult as well. And now we've learned Periscope's being closed down, which is ending March 31st. So we're looking, if you're interested, everybody, we're looking to move the Twitter side of things over to LinkedIn for that. More on that as we get it sorted. But I absolutely concur with your thoughts there, Bookie, around making sure that these sorts of sessions are available post-events and things as well. So important, I think.
I agree. Yeah.
So welcome to Sarah, Bill, and James, who are in the audience this evening. Welcome, Sarah. She's a colleague and a regular viewer on UK Edu Stories. Welcome, Sarah. Hi to Bill joining us as well, and hi to James, who's joining us this evening as well. But enough of us talking and sharing all these things, Bookie. Let's bring our guests in, shall we?
Absolutely.
Really great, lively conversation this evening. Welcome, first of all, to Dr. Sharon Smith, who joins us this evening, and welcome to Leon Hady. Welcome to both of you. How are you, Sharon?
I'm really well, thank you. Yeah, all good here. Busy week, as always. But yeah, it's good. All good.
Fantastic. How about yourself, Leon? Are you okay?
Yeah, really well. Thanks, Mark. Really nice to see you again. Really nice to see you, Bucky, and lovely to be introduced, Sharon.
Hi, great to see you both.
So for those, I mean, we all obviously know each other. We've spoken before, worked together, all these different things. But for our audience who don't know you, could you just take a moment to talk a bit about who you are, where you come from, all that sort of thing? And I'll ask that first of all to you, Leon, please.
Thanks, Mark. So my name is Leon Hady. I was a former head teacher, took a chance on myself, jumped out into EdTech. Now, thankfully, we've made something called Guide Education. We focus a lot on teacher training, and we work with about 700 schools around the world.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Leon. And how about you, Sharon?
Yep, so I am a teacher by trade. I taught in schools for about 8 years, and then I moved over to an online learning organisation called Tube Education. And we deliver live lessons to students both in mainstream education, outside of mainstream education, lots of different contexts. On the side of that, I have a doctorate in education, and I do some research for TUTE, looking at how online learning works, if it works, when it works, as well as all manner of other areas that I'm interested in. Yeah, and I've got a governor hat on as well. We like to throw that one in.
Very busy.
Yeah, I get bored easily. I have to fill my days up with stuff.
That's great to hear. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, both of you, for introducing yourselves on the show this evening. Bucky, do you want to jump into the first?
I will. Thank you so much. Now, Leon, I'm going to address this question to you, if I may. How did you get involved in setting up online teaching and learning platforms?
Thanks, Bucky. So back before everyone was doing it, I was a YouTuber, quote unquote, and I think it started about 2008, 2009, and I made some videos for my class, and essentially it just took off. So we had millions and millions of hits, and so then I got some friends together about 2010, 11. I said, look, let's make other ones for maths and science. I was an English teacher, then that went really well. And then after about 3 or 4 years, we thought, look, there's millions of hits here. We're making money from adverts, but let's commercialize it. So we made what was called Tuition, what still is called Tuition Kit, about 2014, 15. And then from there was just more and more people were asking for maths, English, science tuition for GCSE. And then we just got into a space where people started to ask for a differentiator. And so I started to make teacher training videos because I was head teacher of an outstanding school at the time, and I'd been quite competent at teaching beforehand. So we made all those videos, and it blew the roof off it. Everyone wanted that rather than anything else. And so then we just did 3,000 other videos, high-class animations, and then we built a process to do it as well. So yeah, we started on YouTube. And sometimes when people let me, I say, you know, ultimately all we built was YouTube on steroids with what we do now.
And I think a little bit more than YouTube on steroids, but yeah, it's great. And I think it's also encouraging as well about how far you've come from starting in YouTube, because obviously with the lockdown period, you had a lot more educators than usual going on to share similar things as you did, videos and things like that on YouTube as a starting point.
Yeah, it's a culture now. I mean, you know, one of the nicest things I've seen out of lockdown, and I've written about this before, but the Oak National Academy, it's just brilliant. That there was no reason, but that's been a solved problem for about 20 years. We could have done that, and it's, you know, now we finally got our own Khan Academy, if you will, and it's so good to have, and it's such a national resource, and it's not going anywhere. And I'm really looking forward to that going from strength to strength. And it's really nice to see so many things that I used to do, and I was like, I wish, and now you just see so many of the problems with EdTech and online learning are solved. We haven't solved the process. So all the tech for scaling, speeding up and everything, it's there. And I think now that so many teachers have come online, it's going to be a wonderfully exciting time for the education and EdTech space over the next 5-10 years, because so many ideas are going to come off the back of this, and you're going to see some real quality products coming within the next 5 years.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree, share the excitement as well. Thank you so much, Leon, for actually kicking us off with your experiences there. I'll hand over to you, Mark, for the next question.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bucky. So my next question is for Sharon. Sharon, your role at TUTE is different to that of Leon. So you didn't start your career being involved in online learning, though. So would you mind sharing why you chose to get involved in online learning? Is that okay, Sharon?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, initially I was a classroom teacher. I used to teach. I taught for about 8 years in schools, initially up in Manchester where I qualified and stayed on at one of the schools I was training at. Then I moved over to school not far from where I live, near Chester. And I love teaching. I adore teaching. What I was frustrated with, I guess, was kind of the homogenization of education, this kind of one-size-fits-all approach. I taught a lot of students that were very disengaged, kids that were really struggling with a kind of maybe too narrow a focused curriculum. And I'd done my master's and was looking twofold, really. I wanted to explore, is there a better way to do this teaching and learning thing? Are there other ways that we can do this? So that was my sort of burning question. And I started my doctorate and I moved over to online learning at the same time with this kind of question is, how else can we teach and learn? Is there another way to do this? And to kind of find more bespoke solutions for some of the students that I'd worked with, mainly in alternative provision at the time, but kind of more broadly as well. So yeah, that's how I ended up there. And haven't really looked back. It's been a really brilliant move for me because I still get to do the things I love, the teaching, the learning side of stuff. But I make no apologies for the fact that I don't have to do some of the things I didn't like. The bureaucracy side, I don't miss at all.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing there. Bookie, you got a follow-up question, I believe.
I have, yes, for Sharon. So what have you identified as the key components to effective online learning?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yes.
There's lots of things. I think something that's definitely been learned in lockdown, as well as something that I was sort of focused on beforehand, was that, and I'm sure this is Leon's field more than mine almost, EdTech does need to be fit for purpose. It needs to be designed for the purpose that it's intended to fill. I'm really lucky at Tute. We have got a bespoke learning cloud, a mobile learning cloud technology that is designed by teachers who've gone, what else we need this, and we're, evolving our platform all the time. So that's definitely something that needs to work. But outside of the technology itself, I think in terms of online learning, it's got to be tailored to students. It's got to be designed with them in mind. And some students, that was my whole issue, I guess, with classroom practice. Sometimes when you've got 30 students, it's really difficult to have an individualized approach. Typically in my classes at the moment, I teach far less students in one hit, so it's easier to do that, but also the technology facilitates a more sort of individual approach as well. I think things like a digital pedagogy that is constantly evolving at the moment. We're learning so much all the time about how to do this online learning thing, and there's a big difference, isn't there, between the kind of crisis response remote learning that we've just gone through and sort of established online learning and online practice. So I think, we've looked a lot at things like cognitive load, thinking about how we chunk learning online. By the time a student gets to the point that they've logged into a lesson, they're already dealing with a lot of stuff. So thinking about reducing that stress and breaking down learning, it has been really important. Things like student-teacher relationships. There's this myth that I'm always keen to debunk: remote learning is remote in nature. Not the case, doesn't have to be the case. So working on establishing really good student-teacher relationships. I do quite a lot of work with interviewing students and student voice, finding out what it is they like, what they don't like, and dial up the things they do like, dial down the things they don't. Inevitably, it's the interactivity that they enjoy. Quite a lot of our students love the fact that they're quite anonymous online. They like the anonymity aspect and not being as visible as they perhaps are sometimes in a classroom. That can help a lot of our SEMH students as well. Loads of stuff. I could probably go on for ages.
If it was my show, Sharon, I'd say continue, but of course we need to be fair. And you've raised a lot of key points, and I'll pick out two before I hand over to the next question for Mark. The first one, where you said where you had your teachers who were actually involved in the discussions about what the EdTech had to do, so that it was actually resolving a specific purpose, I think is really key. So that, making it fit for purpose is something that Mark and I often share. And the other aspect that you shared that I thought was really key is about the fact that for our students that struggle with learning, the anonymity, or the fact that it reduces some of the stress. What I found in my school is that the anxieties are limited, so the students can actually engage more. So having that aspect, I think, is really key. Third point, maths was never my strong point. And you can see the third point I also wanted to share is the fact that we said about remote learning does not mean to say that the relationships have to be remote as well. And I think that's really key. It's facilitating the student-teacher relationship that is also part of what makes it effective. And
I completely agree, and I know we've got our pre-planned questions and things, but I was just wondering, Leon, if you could just sort of share your perspectives on the same sort of question, whether your sort of findings from the work you've been doing. Something that struck me increasingly so throughout my career is the way that we work with adults who are teacher training sort of provision, and the way we work with adults is very similar to the ways in which we should be working with children as well, because humans are humans after all. So I was wondering what your sort of thoughts were from your experiences linked to the things that Sharon was sharing there as well. And hi to everyone who's saying hello this evening.
Yeah, loads of people should be wandering by. Unfortunately, the M25 in my house, Mark. I think one of the really, really interesting things with regards to the difference of teaching children and teaching adults is with the children, engagement can still really come across as the forefront online. You're still trying to get them engaged, first of all, and you actually found that you can get the teaching across, or the teaching part across, quicker than you would in a class. With adults, it's slightly the reverse. Because they have more time and they're actually there of their own volition 99% of the time, they're not going through forced CPD, at least that's what we haven't seen so far. You're in a situation where they will absorb and take time. Every adult we generally have on something will do more than we were expecting, or more than what's set for them, because one of the systems we use allows setting. So it's just a very, very different attitude. Adults seem to be engaged more, and it becomes more like a kind of searching through YouTube, Netflix, for things that you like. Whereas with young people, they're still doing what they need to do, and then the engagement afterwards doesn't kind of hang or stick. So that's the first kind of thing that we've seen that's, for us anyway, it's interesting and difficult. Interesting and useful. The second part is what the expectation is. So with teacher training, which is the main focus of what we do, or with the school's own teacher training, it becomes very, very prescriptive is the wrong word, but an element around the idea of things that people are expecting in a very, very strong way. Because we align to university qualifications and we align to certain levels, we have to make sure that that's there. But with the curriculum, it's very, very free. It's the goal where you're getting to with pedagogy that's really, really important. But with andragogy, there's so many more kind of compulsory stops on the tube map that we have to go through. So we haven't had as much flex in that space as we have. Sharon, can I finish one of my friends? Do you need me, or can you go and come back? I'll play Spider-Man after I finish, okay? All right. If someone got a PlayStation 5 and they want me to play Spider-Man with them, Mark. So, apologies, Sharon, apologies, viewers, apologies.
It was supposed to be called PlayStation 2.
It was apparently it's a PlayStation 2. Don't worry, that was 500 quid. I paid 500 quid for a PlayStation 2, apparently. Sorry.
That's perfectly right. Not a worry at all, Leon. Jumping into the question that I did have planned for you, I mean, I think you've touched on it a little bit in your response there as well, actually. But so in your experience, what are the common misconceptions regarding online learning that you found in your experience?
It's learning. It's not learning. It's delivery.
So what do you mean by that?
So essentially, when you look at the space and the place where you're breaking things up, in the same way you look at a light bulb, and a light bulb until we got all these really newfangled light bulbs, the idea is 2% of it was light, 98% of it was heat. So you're getting something that is basically unintended. And with the idea of learning, we focus so much on delivery, maybe a bit on teaching, and then learning is a byproduct. But we don't really focus our learning systems at the moment on getting to the learning faculty, or really focusing. A lot of the systems that are online are built with the predication from what we learned from, and this is the history of online learning in a way. It's built and predicated what we learned from corporate, and corporate wasn't ever interested in teaching you anything. Corporate was interested in covering its tasks. So corporate systems were first put out in the early 2000s. They were actually there just as kind of things to protect companies, and we've kind of gone with that culture into where we are now. So we focus a lot, and if you think of any system, it's delivery, 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 and then a bit of a scattergun approach into what you learn, how you're assessed afterwards. And especially with the tracking of online assessment, I'd say it's the worst, and obviously far worse actually than a teacher. And so really it's not learning, it's a brilliant avenue, it's a brilliant open space, it's a brilliant place to start. And I think within the next, let's say 5-10 years, we're really going to crack the learning part of it. And like this has been a big interest to me for a while.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Leon, for that, and for the expansion there as well. I want to jump into the audience for a second, Bookie, if that's all right with you. I was going to try and text you to ask you to do this behind the scenes, but
Okay.
Leon caught me off guard there for a sec. We had a question from Rajaswari, and I think this is for Sharon actually. She asks, or they ask, does it mean that you're not teaching face-to-face with cameras on? This is interesting because we find that in our webinars, children are more engaged when we turn their cameras on. She then goes on to say, this is regarding the anonymity that Sharon said. So Sharon, could you share what your thoughts are on that? And then I'll come back to you with the same question as well, if I can, Leon, regarding how you talk about delivering things on your platform.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we do teach without webcams on. That's a kind of company-wide decision that we've made. And I think, you know, a lot of the logic around that is around safeguarding and some vulnerable students that can find that quite challenging. And there's also, you know, the issues with, and we've seen them through lockdown, there's been some very entertaining video clips where things have got a bit haywire with somebody's webcam on and things going on in the background. So there is that. I personally have mixed views. I think for the students we're working with at the age they're working with, it works fine. And we've had that because we go from Key Stage 1 all the way up to Key Stage 5. So I think, you know, it works. And particularly, as I say, with those students that are there with social, emotional, mental health needs, for some of our students who have been disengaged and out of mainstream education for a long time, it's quite confronting, the idea to then be visible. I wouldn't say it's a, you know, again, it's not a one size fits all, but it's a decision that Tute have made. I have done it with a webcam and other platforms, but I don't find that a negative at all. In fact, I think it's helped us in a way to hone in on developing other ways, because you've not got those visual checks, which you don't have when you're not in a classroom anyway. To a certain extent, it's quite difficult, particularly if you've got a larger group, to sort of see and read individual faces online. You have to then think about other ways of reading your group and reading your class, and you know, that is something that I think not having the webcams has helped us to focus in on, and using other assessment tools to replace those visual checks. But no, we don't use them as it stands, and it's worked well for us. But that's, like I said, it's not to say it's the only way to do it.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answer to that question from the audience there, Sharon. Thank you. Leon, your setup at Guide is a bit different, because the way that things happen at Tute, it's much more synchronous, whereas the way that people access the content and the courses and the variety of opportunities through Guide is asynchronous. I just wonder what your thoughts were in relating to that question, given how things are set up with Guide.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, even the term, you know, we were talking about asynchronous mentoring and asynchronous support like for a long time, and it's one of those things, just in the same way as coronavirus or lockdown or furlough, it's become really, really popular over the last year.
Zoom bombing, all those things.
Yeah, we we actually, again, with a lot of stuff is trial and error, because obviously we're a private company, we're trying to work out what we're doing. But it's really interesting to say with regards to relationships, because we thought that we would power the system ultimately by the way that we had the strength of relationship one-to-one, because that's what worked for us in schools. So when we were starting out, the first version of what we made, or the first version of the teacher training version we made, we thought we would have this much video, and this is what people refer to. We would have this much asynchronous mentoring, and then we'd have this much live mentoring. And we thought that's what we would need. And then the first year, just as we were going through it and hammering about it, we found that the more videos we gave, the more videos we used. The asynchronous mentoring was about right, because it's about precise, detailed feedback in situ, which was useful. But then the face-to-face demand was zero, like genuinely zero. So we'd be calling up the teachers every 2 weeks, because it was part of the program we were doing. We had a really big contract with one of the biggest supply agencies in the country. So we were doing this asynchronous for the supply agency people all over the country, a different route than the route we thought we'd take. But then basically, every 2 weeks we'd tie up with them, and they'd be like, oh no, I'm fine next week, or oh, I'm fine next time. And then when you got in the call with them, they wouldn't really want to talk about what they wanted to learn or the feedback, because the videos were so strong and the asynchronous mentoring was so precise. And then, so really in those two, if you can do that, you've got scale. And then with the last one, the point there is actually, that's the point that you, again, for lots of companies like VIP Kid and obviously Tute and so many others, is such an immediate thing that gives the customer such satisfaction. But for scaling, you have to have as many people and tutors as possible. So now we have thousands and thousands of teachers use our stuff. And, we're still, in terms of a support team for teaching, we're only about 12 people. In terms of the wider technological development and stuff, we're much more a tech company than we are an ed tech company now, because 70% of our staff are all developers in different areas doing different things. So our experience of it is you don't need any of it. That's for teacher training anyway, because the asynchronous part is right in the middle, and the videos is kind of like personless. Obviously, videos made. Asynchronous is just there every so often, and live. We don't really need at all. We recommend to schools that you still have a mentor every fortnight and do this, that, and the other. But tracking the use, it's not used. People are getting everything they need from the videos if the videos have enough structure and process to them and what comes after them.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Leon. And that is there's a sort of follow-up question for Leon, Bucky, but I'll hand over to you.
Sorry, I was going to ask a separate question. Sorry, I'm just with it. Yeah. Okay. So what advice would you give to anyone that is looking to actually set up an online learning platform?
I think if I was going to go back and give myself the advice in the first instance, I wouldn't say look what's out there, but I'd say look what's off the shelf, because there's so many different things now where I think there's so many, like I said earlier, there's so many solved problems with regards to online learning and online platforms. So the platform's almost irrelevant now. I can point to you to 20, 30 different things that all do the same thing. With the HTML5 open source stuff that's out there, you could make almost anything, even if you had a little bit of coding or two friends that did. What matters now is the process. And the process is much more important than the platform. And that's the part where we've managed to carve a little niche for ourselves. And we're able to bring 4 or 5 different things together. If you're looking to make a platform or support it to be in a situation where you're really just providing delivery, stick with YouTube. Stick with YouTube, because you're going to get found, you're going to get seen. There is no point breaking your back to make something special. And we sponsor a lot of YouTubers. Started out on YouTube. I know the system quite well, and I know where people have kind of got to their peak and then fallen off and tried to find other things, or why not. If you're trying to actually get something that is going to be a commercial product, you have to find a niche that either timing is going to help you with, or that a big customer is going to really help you with. But it's becoming very, very crowded. And one thing that someone said to us at the beginning, when we were still with Tuition Kit and things weren't going, they weren't flying, they were just steady. And someone said to me, listen, this is the Wild West. In online tech, in ed tech, it's the wild, wild west. Stick it out. If you can stick it out, you'll find your niche. And he was right. We found our niche in teacher training, and it's gone superbly. But if I was going to start now, I would just ask myself whether I need a platform for what I'm doing, or whether I need to build a brand around myself on Clubhouse, myself on Twitter, myself on I would focus more around that and emerging technologies and especially coaching technologies that are coming out now. You've probably seen it. The medical world, we've been bombarded with them in Babylon and things such as this, and that's really found its niche. But if you transfer that into teaching, well, it really comes across as a coaching methodology, which again, the new early careers framework is really going to support. So that is where I would go to. I wouldn't try and make a platform. We have every kind of platform we're ever going to need. You know what I mean? I'd say we were very late to the platform party, and I don't think the platforms that come out are going to make a difference. A lot of the AI platforms, or pertaining to be AI platforms, they're not AI, they're machine learning. Obviously, AI is a very grown-up version of machine learning, and it's just not the same thing from the results you're looking for. So, and obviously that costs a ton to make. Yeah, I would wonder in the first place whether you need a platform at all, if you're really trying to look to a brand, or if you're trying to do good. If you're trying to do good, stick in YouTube, you'll be found. Ultimately, if the stuff is quality, you'll be found. Teachers will share it, teachers use it around, etc., etc., etc. But yeah, you've got to ask yourself first, not what makes a good platform, is like, do you need a platform, and what is your niche if you think you do?
Thank you very much. Crystal clear, thank you. I'll hand it over to Mark for the next question.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Bookie. The next question is for you, Sharon. What types of learning resources are best used within online learning in your experience at Tute?
Yeah, so we use our own resources that we make for lessons in the main, and they have a very distinct pedagogy or process, as Leon says, that we follow, and it's part of the kind of science, I guess, behind this developing digital pedagogy, to look at how does learning work with our students, what do we need, what are the ingredients. That's not to say that we don't draw on other stuff as well. So a lot of the YouTubers that Leon mentioned are really popular. I've got a couple of GCSE English classes, and we bring loads of those brilliant YouTubers into lessons as well. I completely agree there with not reinventing the wheel. But for us, it's drawing on those pedagogical principles, and they're not new principles. You know, people like Hady, Sweller, Vygotsky, they've been around for ages. It's not that these are new pedagogical toolkits that we're drawing on. It's more about bringing them into an online setting and making them work. So for us, it's about having opportunities for the students to share in the learning outcomes, the learning objectives, what it is that we're trying to achieve in each lesson, making sure that we are getting a good read on the students and their current abilities when they start the session, tailoring the learning of each session to those students. We have some really good kind of scaffolding going on in lessons. I think the challenge I find with an online lesson is, in the moment, things can change really quickly. So, you know, we all plan as teachers, but actually you have to plan for the kids that are going to get it and the kids that aren't going to get it, and have the contingencies ready to go for students. It can be a bit more tricky to think on your feet than in a classroom. That said, I always have kind of blank slides and things that I will upload so that we can just kind of use an interactive whiteboard like you would in a classroom. So, you know, being able to adapt, thinking really carefully as well about things like questioning. You know, we all did, whether it was Socratic questioning or Bloom's taxonomy of questioning, we all did that in our teacher training. But bringing those skills back in and having that graduation in lessons for students, we always start our lessons kind of at quite a low base and then build up to the more kind of intense skills as we go through. And that, again, is about that kind of cognitive load theory, having students begin a lesson in something they're quite comfortable with, and then moving through their learning as they build their confidence. So I think it's, you know, always about a sharp focus on what those students need. That I think is more important than, you know, which specific resource we've got, just you know, tailoring it to each individual student.
Thank you very much indeed, Sharon, and that sort of resonates with my sort of thinking around that too. Thank you. Based upon your response, and I know Leon will have some thoughts on this as well, so I'll ask you both, Bookie, just following up on this from a question from the audience, about what YouTubers would you recommend for GCSE English? Well, so Leon, as a former English teacher, will be able to give you a few too, but who are your recommendations, Sharon?
Mr. Brough for AQA is brilliant. He goes through every single question. I mean, it is laser focused The man mustn't sleep. He's read every exam paper and every student response that's out there. So he's brilliant if you're on AQA. Mr. Everything English is another one my students really like. He breaks things down in a little bit less of a formal style. Really good on things like bringing out student knowledge of structural devices and language. This is all English, boring English stuff, I'm sorry. But yeah, they would do a really good job. And, you know, sometimes actually just bringing in a clip like that in a lesson, giving them a break from me, giving them a break from their teacher, something a bit different, a visual clip can actually really hammer home something quite difficult in a short space of time. So yeah, those are my two that I use quite regularly.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sharon. Go on, Leon. Who are your sort of few to recommend, would you say?
Oh, well, Mr. Brought's a very good friend, so if I didn't start with him, it would be fine. But one of the ones that obviously we have a tuition centre as part of what we do as well with Miss Whelan's English. I find that really, really useful. I like how informal and relaxed she is in what she does. And then Mr. Michael Gard, who is the English teacher on YouTube as well. He's again, here I'm plugging my friends as well, to be honest with you. But they are both all very good channels, and they've been at it for years and years and years, and they're only doing it for the learners, and I know that doing what they do.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Bookie, have you got any YouTubers you'd recommend?
Yes. Someone actually found during the lockdown period, and her site is called Educated Minds with Miss Cole. So I only know her through Instagram. She's got all these TikToks, you know, sharing key elements of English. I'm learning more about English GCSE than anything else. So she's really good, very thorough, very in-depth, very precise, and she has lots of different guests that are featured that, you know, make it engaging as well as relevant. So yeah, Natalie Cole, Educated Minds with Miss Cole.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Bookie. And since you've got the main screen, and hopefully that's helpful, thank you for the questioning, Catherine. You got the floor, Bookie, so do you want to go in with the next question?
Yes, okay. So my next question is to Leon. What mistakes did you make along the way?
Oh yeah, this is, you know, with no, all joking aside, the biggest thing or the biggest transition is, in teaching, we're very, very caring, very, very supportive. You can generally trust someone. You know, if someone lets you down, it's not because they're trying to screw you over. It's for one reason or another. That's the collegiate nature of schools. I can't think of any school I've ever been where people have let me down and it was on purpose. Do you know what I mean? It's not like that in the business world at all. I'll tell you this story just to give you the idea. So the mistake I made was being too trusting. The mistake I made was trying to take some of the culture and belief that we had in terms of how we treat each other in schools into the business world. And I'll just give you this one example. We're very lucky early on and very, very fortunate. We signed a £2.1 million deal and we were over the moon. We were just like, this is the best, this is going to be great. We did a 6-month demo with this group and a group of schools and these teachers, and it went excellent. And then they were the people that we signed, I won't name any names, but the people that we signed with, they turned around and they said, brilliant, we can't wait to start in September. And we worked hell for leather for getting up September, paying for everything, this and the other. So excited, it'd all gone well. This was going to be the making of us. September came, and we were like, let's go. And they went, oh, just a few things, really sorry, XYZ, we're going to start in November. And we're like, we can hack it out till November, it's fine. Got to November, waiting, you know, really got the bit between the teeth now. And then this company, that was worth, you know, in its parents' company, it's probably worth 400 million, right? So there's no reason to screw us around apart from the following. November comes and they go, we love it, we're nearly there, just a few more legal things we've got to take care of from our end and then get ready in January. So I was like, right, okay, cool. And this was a bit of a problem for us because, you know, our cash flow was built around and we put all our effort, energies into this. Got to January, and then in January it was like, right, we got to get going now, guys. And then they turned around and they said, really sorry, just we don't know exactly when, but we're gonna do it. The trial had gone well, we'd done all our bit, we got to this point, and they were screwing around, and that's where you've got to have other irons in fire. You can't trust in one thing, and luckily we had some other things. So I said, take care, goodbye, and we walked away. And then they were like, what, why are you doing this? Chase. And then push came to shove in early March. They wanted a big meeting now. It's all trying again. Big meeting with the CEO of the £400 million part of the company. And then you sit there and you're like, yep. And I'm like, there's no way we're going to pick this up for you. Our deal doesn't include this. And then a week later, the guy I had the contact with, who's head of this division, he came and sat with me in the office and he tried again to convince me one last time. And then he said, I said no. And he said, all right, Leon, all cards on the table. We were trying to, when we knew how good what you had was, so we were trying to stop you by making you fail, and then we'd buy you. And that has happened several times in different guises. And so the biggest mistake I made, or the thing you learn most, and the thing I'd recommend to any teacher who wants to set on their own this and the other, is be very wary of the level of trust and hope you had in people from your time in teaching and what you're doing there. Outside of it, it's not like that. It's very much not like that. I'm not saying that it's negative. Go for it, 100%. But you asked me what the biggest mistake was. It wasn't really about the businesses. You buy something at £1, you sell it for £2. Make sure that it doesn't cost you more than £1 to do it. That part's not the hardest part. The hard part is actually where you have to take off your teacher mentality, where you trust people and you want the best and you expect the best from people, and just put that out the window to a side and go into every conversation going, I'm going to have my guard up. So my biggest mistake was not having my guard up.
That's very sobering to hear.
And no relation to Michael
business.
Gard, obviously, with that.
What did you say, buddy?
And no relation to Michael Gard there with that one, when you're talking about having your guard up. So,
if I said Michael Gard,
a bad dad joke there.
But yeah,
thank you so much for that. Very candid moving myself out of education into the world in which I work now. I mean, that's a lesson I've had to learn myself over the years as well. It is not the same in school as it is in the business world, and it's one of the areas where we still have as educators that sort of inherent sort of belief and faith in humanity and all these sort of things, but business is not that. It's cutthroat. It's a completely different kettle of fish. So thank you for your candor with that response, Leon. Thank you very much indeed. Going back on to the questions about online learning, I've got another question for you now, Sharon. What are the most effective ways to do online formative or summative assessments? I'm most interested really in the sort of summative assessment type thing there. So I think the conversation around formative assessment online is quite well spoken now. There are lots of teachers using your quizzes tools and your Kahoots and your Quizlets and your whatnots, an awful lot. But what we're not really seeing an awful lot of is summative assessments. But yeah, I'm keen to sort of hear your response on both of those things, Sharon. What are your sort of best approaches to those two types of assessments in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, formative assessment, it's got to be there in every lesson. It should be there all the time. It's a staple of a pedagogy. So I agree with that to a certain extent. And, even just really simple things like self-assessment with the students, getting them to tell you where they're at, how they're going to improve, a bit of metacognition there. Definitely, it's embedded in every lesson. I think everybody's focus is shifting to summative assessment at the moment because of the kind of COVID situation and the cancelling of exams again this year. So, there's a massive pressure, particularly for those of us educated online, to evidence student work and to come to that point where we have a really good basis for any teacher assessed grades. So it's definitely something we're focusing on quite a lot at the moment. What we tend to do with our students is obviously they have their courses if they're doing a GCSE or A-level. Lessons are built around specific areas of that course. So again, sorry, we're a very English focused team, aren't we? For my kids, for example, we will be focusing on a specific assessment objective, working on that, and then at the end of that sequence of lessons we will be doing a summative assessment to check on their learning, and that usually will take the form at the minute particularly of exam-based questions, because it then provides us with evidence to support their grades. They will do a variety really. A lot of students, I teach a couple of different boards. So AQA, for example, is quite easy to do because they're very formulaic questions. I also teach some students over the border in Wales that are doing WJC, and they have a very different kind of breakdown of questions. There's a lot more questions in a paper, and a lot of them are a lot shorter form questions, low mark questions, low tariff questions. So for them, it can be that we will look at a skill and look at how to approach a task. They'll do the task in the lesson, and I'm compiling student evidence based on what they've done during that lesson. So it can be that I'm taking screenshots of their work, I'm copying and pasting or downloading the chat box so that I can save that, and have those kind of really short forms of summative assessment, if you like, at the end of individual lessons, as well as setting, mock papers and things. So we we use part of our platform is called Spaces, and that is where we set materials between lessons, and we could set, you know, a GCSE paper or part of a paper for them to then, you know, independently complete, upload their assignments, we'll mark it and send it back to them. So, you know, there's all sorts of different ways to do summative assessment at the moment. But yeah, it's definitely more in the fore now that, you know, even those of us teaching online are having to provide the evidence for teacher assessed grades than it would typically be when they go off to an exam centre at the end of the year.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for sharing that. So before I actually pose another question, I've got a question from the audience. Catherine Kirby, she'd like to ask you a question, Sharon. How do you prove that individual students have progressed when you get to the end of every remote learning session?
Yes, there's a couple of ways we do that. The students do self-assess. So our lessons will be broken down into sections, normally 2 or 3 outcomes, and students will self-assess. And we will, you know, good practice is to follow up. If they've said, oh, I'm in a scale of 1 to 5, I've given myself 5 out of 5, you know, okay, well, what makes you a 5? Or if you're a 3, how are you going to get to a 5? And you know, really checking their self-assessment isn't, you know, whatever number they just happen to click on randomly. So there's the self-assessment tools that we use. Like I say, using individual questions and recording student responses, marking those as you would in a class is another thing that we do. We also teacher assess progress and engagement at the end of every lesson as well. So for every student, they'll get a score from their teacher based on how well they've engaged in that lesson and how much progress we teacher assess them having made. And that then goes into kind of like a lesson evaluation document that is shared between us and either their organisation, their school, their local authority if they're out of mainstream or home educated. It could be shared with their parents. So that's a couple of ways that we do it.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, so my next question will be to Leon. And workload reduction is something that's really key, and it's, you know, been at the forefront for many years. So Leon, my question is, what should online learning platforms have in place to reduce workload?
Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
No.
Can now.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Turn you back on.
The element that I would focus on most is we're not going to try and make something new and then save time there, because essentially if we're making a new problem that takes time, even if it takes less time, it's not going to help us. What we need to do is find out the parts, so it takes away days from teachers, and then we need to put them in a situation where we remove or reduce that. So the obvious one is inset and after school training and inset days, or twilight sessions as they're called. Essentially, we can be in a situation where we condense, you know, what we know from online learning. I don't know what Dr. Smith would say along about this, but generally I've always found if I'm teaching something online or one-to-one, I can do in 15 minutes what I'd normally do in a lesson. And it's the same with inset, some of the stuff we cover there. You find that a lot of what we do is trying to pad out and fill a unit of time, not necessarily trying to get the information across in the most concise and easy way for both the person making the training and the person absorbing the training. We fluff things, you know, we fill them out to fill the unit of time. And that's just a thing of lessons or a thing of inset and a thing of the rest. So generally just being able to take video insets is the first thing I'd always say. Anything you're ever giving someone, you try to get everyone together in a room, probably not going to be worth it. Give them the information on video instead so they can capture it. I'm a big believer in video and the power of video for several different aspects, but I think video-based learning is where we are now. Social video-based learning is what's coming next, when you actually get the blend between the time of how your assessments or how your progress is kind of tracked in a much more informal sense, along with your kind of in the rhythm of the social engagement that you have on other platforms. So that's what platforms will ultimately have to do. You have to get into video, then you have to get into the same speed and precision is the wrong word. You have to get in the same speed and ease as WhatsApp, and you need to leave people with that feeling rather than the idea of chasing certificates or chasing an assessment result or finding out what grade you got in this, that, and the other. It'll become much more blended, not necessarily in terms of what we do online and offline, but in terms of how we mix the use of tech for study and tech for social.
Okay, that's very interesting. I think it also explains why we have so much in terms of, say, like TikTok. I know it's only 15 seconds or what have you, but you can actually have bite size, the idea of bite size insets or bite size training or things like that. That's actually given across, and I've never thought about the social learning aspect as well. So that's an interesting stance. And yeah.
It's interesting you say that, Bucky, and I don't know, I don't want to go too long, but I'll squeeze this. If you ever look at a self-help book title and you need more than the title, there's probably something interesting there. Do you know what I mean? Like if you read the title, it says, feel the fear and do it anyway. And then you're just like, I need to read a book on it now, or have I encapsulated all of it? It takes a skilled person, but there is many people who can get you a whole thing to actually leave you thinking for a long time in 15, 30 seconds that certain social media allow.
Okay.
There's lots to take on board with that as well. So something that's been really sort of a sort of cornerstone of my thinking in recent years has been this idea of aggregated marginal gains, and that's where I see this sort of this way of sort of learning being really powerful and impactful. I see Mike Tholfsen, who's product manager at Microsoft, for example. He's regularly sharing his quick tips on Microsoft tools, and it's great. It's in and of itself, learning that Control and P will print a document. Let's say, I don't think he's actually done a Control and P one, to be fair, but let's just use that as an example. One little clip there, and one person or a bunch of people learning that in and of itself isn't going to transform things. But I'll always remember, Leon, the day we first met, when you delivered at that same session as me in London, and you were talking about using dictation on your Mac as a means of reducing. I won't explain what happened with the mistake, but with the transcription error. But the idea behind it is the same, isn't it? It's that when you add these little wins together, the combined, the cumulative total of all these little things can actually be much bigger, can't it?
So much so. And Mark, I touch upon that just one step further, just in the way that we were talking about how, because remember, the tail in education is always wagging the dog. And with utter respect for what Dr. Smith said in terms of we have to assess and we have to value of each lesson, we have to know each lesson, this and the other. The marginal gains there are kind of cemented within the lesson, but really that marginal gains over time is probably a lot better. If I was to ever go back to teaching now, and I was exactly the same when I was in the classroom, but having seen learning and opportunities for learning in different ways, I would not assess in any way as regularly, anywhere near as much as I used to, because I'm waiting for the marginal gains of what's been going on, the differentiation, the different items, and then let that absorb and swirl in the world around before I get anywhere. Because when we try and have an expectation of learning to happen, and we can't, and we have to try and find measurements to prove that learning's happened, to please people for an exam system, which isn't really what's happening. We're really catching mood reflections rather than catching any learning installments there, and it just needs a lot longer time. And we need to be generally a lot more patient with learning, and that's why quick assessment things as well. It's just responsive. It's not reflective of learning. It's just reflective of what's happening in the moment to do with mood and the rest of it. It's not reflective of the bigger picture. And I think that's the biggest problem I have with online learning is at the moment is that it's the relationship aspect that more than anything that drives this, and that's where the social part of video learning will come in so strongly.
Thank you, Don. A lot of the conversations as well about assessments, it sort of centers around this idea or the sort of central question of who is the assessment actually for. So if it's not actually for the learner to actually help them understand and unpick where their misconceptions are, or if it is sort of, say, to tick a box or to share with your SLT colleagues or someone other than the child itself, it sort of gives it that sort of question of validity as well, doesn't it?
100%. It's driven. You're trying to turn a child into a data point. You're
Yeah.
trying to turn a child into a fountain of data, when really a child should be a fountain of desire, or a form of desire. And you should let them go and do all the things that they want. And then when they're on that path, it takes a skill. And most teachers can do this. If you get a child, you can work with a child, and then you can kind of flex them like inside. It's like, well, where do I need to be? Who do I need to be? But what we actually do with teachers, we say, all right, you're going to get into this straitjacket. The straitjacket's called the curriculum, and now you're going to treat the child with the straitjacket. And that's and that's why the beauty of the online approach means now all we need is the educators to find ways to do this, and then you can make the data say anything and tick all the boxes you want while really getting to the learner.
Thank you very much for that response, Leon. And that's a bit of conversation there. I'm mindful of the time, and I've also lost track, Bookie, whether it's my turn to ask a question or yours.
I think it's yours. I think it's yours, Mark. Yeah.
I'll jump and ask a question, but mindful, Sharon, that we've only got 7 minutes left before we need to wrap the show up. So the next question is for you, Sharon. And I'm going to ask you, what advice would you give to schools and colleges to ensure that online learning is effective? So, nice, easy one to do in 6 minutes.
Yeah, do you know, some of the points that are coming up are really interesting as well in terms of this idea of a straitjacket. And you know, I completely kind of agree to a certain extent that we are working within a straitjacket sometimes, because unfortunately things like curriculum and exams haven't caught up yet. So I'm on board with some of the stuff that we're saying as well. I think, in terms of making sure it's working and for schools to get their online learning working, I'll go back to the point that we started with. And, we're now talking about something that's quite different from what we've had in the last 12 months, that was this crisis response. We're not thinking about, what do we do now the schools are shut? We're thinking about how do we enhance student experience, and how do we tailor their education to suit them in a better way. I think, some of the things that we're talking about in terms of social education and the video learning and flipped kind of learning approaches are there as well. So there's all sorts of things that we could go into. I think in terms of being brief on this point, I guess thinking about identifying the need for a student to do a different form of learning. First of all, what is the purpose of them coming into the online environment? And if it is a very defined need to catch up on X, Y, and Z that they missed for whatever reason, to complete a GCSE course, to extend their learning in a specific area. We've got different parameters again there from some of the things that we're touching on, and I think we're governed by that. But I guess in terms of your online provider and your school, the key is to have that dialogue, that conversation. What are we doing here? What is the purpose of it? What are the outcomes that we're wanting to achieve? And then finding the ways to approach that for those learners as well. I guess, delivering that program. And whilst I kind of take the assessment point, I do think you need to measure impact. Is what you're doing working? And not necessarily in terms of grade, but in terms of student voice as well. Are students getting something from this? Is it helping? Is it supporting their learning? If they're telling you it's not working, then something's got to change. So I think there's definite areas there in terms of student voice that I'm really keen to kind of drill down into, and giving those students some agency in what they're doing, because often students looking for an online education solution are doing so because what they were doing already in a school context didn't work for them.
Yeah.
And then, always for me, it comes back to the fact that there is never a one-size-fits-all approach. There are so many brilliant tools out there. It's about finding the right solution for that child in their context, what will work for them, rather than, trying to shoehorn them into something that's not really working.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, Mark, were you going to say something?
No, I was just saying thank you to Sharon for that really clear response, and just asking you, Bookie, if you wanted to sort of start thinking about asking the last question and start to wrap up.
Yes, but I noticed that there were some questions that the audience asked as well that touched upon flipped learning. But the very, very last question I'll ask is this: if someone is actually interested in learning more about online learning, what would you suggest they read or listen to?
Mark Anderson.
Hey. I'm going to promote you for that response there, Leon. Thank you very much.
I only came on to plug all my friends, Mark.
I've not had a plug so far. No, I jest. So in the closing seconds, beyond Mark, Leon, is there anyone else or anything else you'd suggest?
Yeah, read something like The Holographic Universe, and it just kind of takes away the idea of limitations. And then when you go through that, you can approach anything in a very different way, and including how you deliver things online.
Thank you very much for your succinct response there. Sharon, if I pose a question to you as well, what advice would you give in terms of where they could what they could read, listen to, anyone actually connect with?
Yep. So I'll echo, obviously, yourselves is our first port of call.
I jest. Can I say I was joking, genuinely. Mark is my go-to, so yes.
Sharon, have you seen Bucky's Twitter? Have you seen Bucky's LinkedIn? Have you seen Bucky's book?
Shameless self-promotion. Go for it. It's fine. It's fine. Then I suppose there are quite a few interesting studies coming out after this whole lockdown thing. So I've been kind of reading a few of those. I know the Global Ed Tech conference that we were involved in a few weeks ago. I really enjoyed the kind of lessons that came out of this shock to the system report that Educate and Cambridge have been working on together. I've just published something myself in the British Journal of Education and Technology. They've got some really fascinating stuff, and BERA as a whole have some really good special interest groups that you can sign up for, describing young people's use of digital tech was a blog I was reading the other day. I think that was Peter Twinning, I want to say, and that one was really good. So yeah, there's quite a lot of really relevant stuff coming out as a result of this right now. So yeah, subscribe to everything and then kind of filter through at your leisure.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you both so much. Yes, so I'm going to hand over to you, Mark, in the closing 60 seconds.
Okay, thank you very much, Bucky. Thank you both too. Let's bring everyone sort of equal footing here. It's not about, there we go, all level playing. Thank you so much to Dr. Smith and to Leon for joining us this evening. In the closing moments, just in case you haven't picked up where you can find out more about our guests this evening, I'll put the banners across the bottom again. If you want to find out more about Leon and his company and the work they do, please take an opportunity to look at guideeducation.co.uk. If you're looking to follow Sharon on Twitter, you can do so at SharonSmith_edu. As she's mentioned, she works at Tute, and you can find their website at tute.com. And if you want to follow Leon and his company on Twitter as well, then you can do so at guideeducation_ there. Thank you so much to our guests for joining us this evening, and thank you to you, the audience, for joining us as well. Next week on the show, we're going to be exploring data privacy, something which is very important and something we should always be thinking about. And so I'm really looking forward to welcoming our special guests, Rowena Fielding and Tony Shepherd, who've got similar but slightly different approaches and thinking around data privacy and their experiences in the work they do. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from them on the show next week. But for now, until then, thank you so much to Bucky, thank you so much to Dr. Smith, and thank you so much to Leon for joining us this evening on UK Edu Stories. And if you haven't done so yet, as Bucky said right from the outset, please do hit the subscribe button down in the corner. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you for an episode next week. Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Bye.